Dan, we are back. We've been doing a lot of podcasts lately.
Yes, it's a big weekend here at Sanctus Ranch, and
we're on a roll.
Excited to have some great folks, great friends in to spend the weekend and share some stuff with us.
That's right. And the good news is that all the equipment's cooperating.
Yes.
So the technology side of things are good. We've got different camera angles that are looking great. There's Father John Lovell, our guest today. We've got you on face cam. That's your face cam over there, Father John Lovell. Say hello.
Hello.
Excellent stuff. So we're going to have a conversation today. We're going to get to know Father John Lovell a little bit better.
Absolutely.
We're going to hear a little bit about his backstory. We're going to hear a little bit about his mission, because he's got an important mission that he's working on. But here's the best part. The two of you guys are kind of joining forces in a sense here as part of the RCCI and part of Father John Lovell's mission, which is tied in with the canceled priests.
Right.
And so you guys are cooking something really exciting.
Yeah, we're very happy right now. This week has been an interesting week. We want to thank Crisis Magazine for publishing one of the articles that I wrote, just about another organization that was out there that maybe has lost its way a little bit in the mission, and so part of the reason that that was written was to let people know what was going on. But it was probably the greatest intent was to bring awareness to the fact that there still are these great men, great holy priests that are out there that are in need of support. And I think there's a lot of people that really have a great love for the priesthood. They see some of the challenges that are going on, and the persecution continues, even though things might have changed in Rome. Not much change has come back yet. And so there's still a need to support these men. So we made a decision after a couple of conversations, seeing what was going on. We thought, okay, it is an important time for the Restoring Christian Culture Initiative to also say, we're just going to set up a fund that is specifically for the canceled priest, called Unprofitable Servants. And then we are going to support priests. And it's going to be an organization or a fund, part of our organization, that's going to make sure that the money that comes in for that goes direct out there. And
yeah, well, let's start with this. Let's go back to your article. So you wrote an article in the Crisis Magazine, and it got shared by some well-known folks in the Catholic space, for lack of a better term. Dr. Peter K, as I'll be referring to him for the rest of the weekend, so that I can stop slaughtering his last name.
It's very simple. Quash New Ski.
Quash. Is it really Quash?
Quash New Ski.
Okay. Well, guess what? He'll be here later, so we'll confirm that. But I think you're onto something.
I'm hoping he hasn't changed it since then. So I think he's told me 3 different types of ways to pronounce his name.
Okay. All right.
Dr. K it is.
So we'll go back to the original. Yeah. So Dr. K shared it.
Yes.
Several other people shared it. There were a fair amount of comments as well, wherever it was shared.
Well, and I think one of the reasons that the comments are there, and Father, you and I have talked about this, when there are nonprofits out there, very often, people hear about them, they go, hey, that's something that I want to support. They make a donation. They think everything's great, and they really don't look again. And so, as I've been involved in nonprofits for a little bit, we file a 990. All nonprofits do at some level. And so Father and I were talking and, talking a little bit about some of the challenges. I was reached out to from many priests that are still, trying to figure things out. They were running into challenges, not being supported. And then we just happened one day, I think while we were talking, I just popped on. I like to look all the time. And I popped in and there was a 990 that was released for this other organization.
Fairly early.
Yeah. Shocking, and when a 990 comes out, and I printed it off so that everybody knows it's here. These are not fun things that people want to read through.
Yeah.
But as soon as we opened them up, we were like, whoa.
Yeah.
Hey, this is interesting. But wait a second, there's some real challenges. So
yeah, I just want to mention, before I met you, I didn't know anything about that document. You kind of opened my eyes to the world and you showed me a certain website that, where you can access those things, and you started bringing up, you showed me several organizations and you said this one, they're getting paid X, and this one is, here's what stays within the organization, and I just never really thought of or realized the fact that stuff was so accessible.
Right.
And nor did I realize the importance of keeping a little eyeball on it. I think it's good to do that no matter what the nonprofit organization is. more people should be aware of it. But to your point, it kind of reminds me of the credit report a little bit. You kind of have to dive into the thing. It is a little difficult if you're not comfortable with it, right? And so maybe you can help us decipher some of those key points on that document today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, and as Father and I kind of went through this, it just jumped out right away. This was one of those that was very simple. So a couple of things that people should hear. I did write this article in large part to just call attention to what's going on. And because we saw the problem, we saw there was still a need, then we took the action. So there's some people that think, oh, well, I wrote an article so that it can promote our fund. That's not the case. I just want to help priests. That's all we've ever tried to do.
Sure.
But when you pull open this 990, you're able to look at what the organization wants to tell people. So just remember, this is a 990 of, let's be honest, not an enormous nonprofit. There are big healthcare companies that are nonprofits, and there's all kinds of stuff. But this is really, what does the organization want to tell the IRS and tell the public that they're doing?
Yeah.
They have to report the funds, they have to report, executive compensation. But then this whole middle section of a 990, this is where you get to tell your story to your donors. This is what they want to hear.
Sure.
And what's interesting about this 990, and this is where everything started from, is you get way back here in the back of the 990, and there's a Schedule I. We were talking about this on the phone, and all of a sudden it says, priests in need of aid. Number 7. Amount of cash grant, $42,747. And we both gasped on the phone. I did some quick math and I went, are you kidding me? That means that they averaged $6,000 in total grant to this only 7 priests. Now, Father, you and I have talked before. I know there's different numbers out there. How many canceled priests are there?
7.
That is an interesting question, because everybody wants to define what a canceled priest is and is not. And I don't like the term myself. I think it's too parochial, too new of a term. But it's hard to use other terms, because sidelined could actually mean somebody is sidelined for a good reason. And so what we like to say is that a priest that is canceled because he didn't do anything wrong. He held up for the truth. He held up for tradition. He stood against the jab. These sorts of things that he did that got him in trouble and got him kicked out. For example, I and several of the canceled priests, none of us are suspended according to canon law. We're removed from ministry in a non-penal, non-judicial way. Now, talk about legalese talk. What does that mean, to be removed in a non-penal, non-judicial way? That's basically what they're saying is they're trying to sidestep canon law, which is the law of the church. And what's sad is that you have prelates high up in the hierarchy in Rome, where I have had my case adjudicated, who seem simply fine with this idea that a priest can be removed for no reason at all. In my particular case, the Congregation for Clergy made it quite clear that my bishop cannot keep this in perpetuity, meaning that it cannot be forever. He has to eventually return me to ministry, but they never put, it can only be temporary, but they never put a number of years where it's temporary. I'm going on year 14, starting in July. 2012 is when I was removed by, at the time, my new bishop. He was only bishop for 6 weeks, Bishop Malloy. And what I noticed being out of ministry, having to move in with my father, who has now passed away, having to get a job, having to support myself, having to support my sister, my father, is that there are a lot of priests out there in a similar situation. So to get an exact number is hard, but I would say that in the United States, there's probably thousands of priests that are canceled. Mm-hmm. And some of them don't need help. I know one canceled priest in my diocese. His family is very well off. His brother is very, very rich. He prays for us. He wishes us the best, but he does not need any of the resources that an organization like ours can afford. And that's great. But a lot of priests don't have anyone to turn to, and they need someone to turn to, because the little that the diocese gives is not enough to sustain oneself. For example, and I've said this in the past in other interviews, I get $1,700 gross from my bishop. That would barely cover rent in the state of Illinois, really in any state. Right. That would barely cover rent, let alone groceries, gas, and all of that. So, we want to establish a fund. And, let me say this up front. When the coalition imploded at the end of 2023, a lot of people commented online, well, you should just give directly to the priest. Fine, do it. If you want to do that, go for it. But there are a lot of people that like giving to nonprofits, to 501c3s for the tax benefit. I sometimes wonder if people realize how much they have to give before it actually kicks in with the IRS that you're getting money back. But a lot of people like doing that. And the problem that I found with my own company that I founded the coalition was that we were not, the treasurer, the executive director was not putting out monthly or even quarterly financial reports. We were going into board meetings. I had no idea, even as the president, how much money was coming in and how much money was going out. There was no database set up in order to catalog who the donors were. I mean, even though we had a staff and that's what they were hired for, the executive director was being paid quite handsomely, we weren't getting this information. And listen, as the founder of an organization, as the president of the board, yes, the buck stops with me, but I agreed to step away from the board in order to clean this up. And all I've noticed in all of the 990s that's come out, it's actually gotten worse since I stepped down, and I eventually kicked out of the organization. I was kind of made the scapegoat for all of this. And in reality, it's just shocking, the things that are in the 990. And Dan, I just want to say thank you so much for putting this article together, because you're just laying out facts. I mean, nobody can accuse you of any ad hominem attacks in this. This is just clearly, this is what's going on based on the 990 and explaining it. Because the 990, sometimes if you're not familiar with the 990, you can get lost in it very easily.
You certainly can. But I think that's the challenge that we run into in a lot of organizations. You and I were talking about, Marco. We were looking at other organizations locally that have the same problem. It is difficult at times to have great transparency, but you also have to take a look at what kind of a nonprofit is it. If you have a nonprofit that its stated goal is to take in funds and to distribute those funds out to other people, well, that should be pretty clear cut, clean and dry. If you're running an orphanage, if you're running a school, if you're running a retreat center, if you're running something else that's got buildings and other things, let's be honest, it's probably more challenging, but people can see everything you're doing. Yep. In this particular case, what we had is, there wasn't great transparency. So when we said, hey, let's go ahead and do this, one of the things that we're committed to is direct transparency. We should know that it came in, it should go right back out. And there still are a lot of priests that need help. Even as you were describing, the support that you still receive from the diocese, I know a lot of priests that get nothing.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing. And they're basically forced in a situation where they're like, well, what do I take for a job now? And it's really sad when you've got a priest that's having to stock shelves at a grocery store or work at Home Depot or wait tables or sell insurance. When there's a lot of us here that would like to support that ministry. A priest is still saying mass for all of the faithful every day. Yep. We need those prayers. So the other thing that we'd like to do with our organization and the fun that we're doing here is to make sure that people see what's going out, that the priests are supported, and that priests can come to us and say, hey, this is what we need. The other thing that I noticed here is just to kind of give us a little bit of an idea. When you have the kind of money that's coming into an organization and only 6% of the money is making it back out to whoever was designated to receive the benefit.
Let's put that another way. 6 cents of every dollar.
Exactly.
6 cents of every dollar. That's going to priests. Yeah.
That's challenging.
For 2024,
really yeah. And, one of the other things that you'll notice, and again, just kind of jumping back so that people can see it, because there's probably a lot of people that may go pull this up. You can go out to the IRS website. You can type in the name of an organization. If you know their tax ID, you can do that. You can go to ProPublica. You can go to GuideStar. There's lots of places that you can get it, and you can get a lot of information. And I recommend, if you're donating to an organization, go look up their 990. And if you have any questions, just call them and be like, hey, can you explain this to me?
Yeah.
Because maybe they don't even like putting it together.
Yep.
But one of the other challenges that you have is you have to take a look at executive compensation. There was executive compensation in an organization, but it's got to be in some sort of sense that it makes sense with what the mission is.
Right.
So let's be honest. Yeah, I have no problem with people making good money. But we're not supposed to make the same money in some sort of nonprofit ministry, if you would, that you can make out in the outside world. That just doesn't make sense. If we're supposed to make a ton of money, we should make that on the outside world. Sure. One of the things that you'll notice in here is if you go to the board, there's individuals that are making way too much money, in my humble opinion, which doesn't matter. But it just seemed shocking. But the most shocking part is in comparison to the support that was going out to the priest.
Exactly.
Right. And in proportion to the total amount that's coming in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah. Because it's not as, a gargantuan moneymaker yet, or a ministry or nonprofit yet. Some of them, there's some that make just ridiculous amounts of money that come in, right?
Right.
But in proportion to what's going out to the intended, the name of the doggone group, right?
Right.
That's a little shocking. Yeah. That's a little shocking.
The other thing that you got to watch out for too is organizations that have too much money sitting in cash, without a stated purpose. Now, listen, if you're building buildings, if you're going to build a new hospital, if you're going to do any of these crazy things, there's definitely a need to save up cash and be ready to go with it. But in this particular one, you put in your assets, we're talking about over $1.5 million sitting in an account that nobody knows what its purpose is for. Sure. And so I think those are good questions for the donors to get answers to.
And it was questions that I asked when I was on the board is, why are we not investing this money? As soon as we get $50,000 in the bank, I said, we really should invest this. And God bless Matthew Pleasy, the Catholic CPA. I brought him on board to get the finances together. And he actually put together a plan, put together a budget, and it was just completely ignored by the board. In fact, he was let go by the board, and they brought in their own company out of Dubuque, Iowa, I believe, somewhere in Iowa, to do the bookkeeping. And I'm thinking to myself, why are you bringing in a company that's not even Catholic in order to do this when we have an excellent CPA who's putting together exactly what we all wanted, reports, monthly reports, and putting together a budget and saying, hey, look, we have all of this money sitting in a checking account. Let's put it into a mutual fund or something that can actually let it grow. And I stated this to the board when I was still president. I would love to get to the point where payroll was coming off the interest of the money coming in, not coming off the money, that was just going for the priest, and that any interest that we were collecting, that's how we do payroll. Yeah. And they look at me like I was an idiot, okay? And and I was accused publicly that I didn't know what I was doing. But I'm sorry. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. Any company, for profit or not for profit, would love to say, yes, let's get payroll, or it's coming off the interest of the investment.
Of course, sure. Yeah, dream scenario.
Well, and I think the other thing too is, let's be honest, an organization can run however they want to. There's nothing wrong with that. If this is exactly what they want to run, and again, this is the document that goes out and tells people, well, that's fine. But as a donor to an organization, as a benefactor to an organization, you want to know, well, what am I spending money on?
Right.
And that's your right to know that. So I think people need to see it so that they can know what's going on.
Sure.
So I would run things differently. Well, guess what? This has happened to me many times, Father. We talked about the retreat center and other things. This retreat center started because I sat around and go, somebody could do a better job with this. And everybody's like, all right, well, guess what? I typically just step up and go, all right, well, if I'm going to run my mouth, might as well go do it. Here's what we're looking to do with the Cancel Priest Fund is we're looking for unprofitable servants to be something that someone can donate in, and it goes direct out to priests. Now, also, we'll vet the priests. All of that will be there. There's a system in place to do that.
Yeah.
But that way we can get direct support to priests, so some of these horrible decisions that are being made by folks can be avoided.
And that was the direction I wanted to go with this. So before we started, Father John was not bashful at all in his statement that he wants to raise a lot of money for this organization because there's a lot of work to be done.
Sure.
I'd like for you guys to sort of sell the dream a little bit. If I'm watching and I'm listening, I don't know too much about this whole concept, or maybe I'm sort of familiar with this idea that there are canceled priests that are running around. They didn't do anything nefarious and evil like the other ones that are actually being elevated, but that's a different podcast.
That's a different podcast.
But, and by the way, what a shocker, right? That we've got about at least 1,000 canceled priests when we're in a priest shortage in so many ways here, at least here in the U.S.,
Right.
But again, that's another episode. But sell the dream. What exactly comes from this? If someone's pumping money into an organization like this and it's being managed properly, it's actually going to the priest. Okay, so we can establish that as step number one.
Yep.
Let's ensure that these men have some form of livelihood again.
Right.
But what are they doing in their working capacities as a canceled priest? Can you guys kind of talk a little bit about those opportunities?
Well, I'll kind of give you the idea behind how we're going to handle some of the funds going out, and then I'll give you one example and toss it back to Father Lovell afterwards. One of the things is there needs to be a substantial enough grant given to the priests so that they can actually do something with it. So the first thing is, if someone makes an application to the Cancel Priest Fund that we have, Unprofitable Servants, based on availability of donations to do so, that priest should be able to, on an annual basis, automatically get a $10,000 grant from our organization. After that, we've set it up so that they can then make an additional $25,000, and that's based on how much do they need. So kind of like when you're getting into retirement age in Social Security, you can still go have another job, but it reduces your Social Security benefit so that it kind of works out. That can be the same in this second level. Because let's be honest, if you're going to live on your own without support, the minimum you can probably do so is about $35,000 a year. That's the need, and that's bare bones.
Correct.
Then our hope is that we'll start to find ways for some of these men that have skills and gifts and want to be involved to do some other things. I'll give you the example. The reason that we're doing this is this last year alone, the Restoring Christian Culture Initiative paid out in housing, in salaries, over $100,000 to canceled priests. I have priests that teach at Lumen Christi Academy. A priest would do well to do that.
Yep.
But typically they can't even get that job because of the cabal system that's out there.
Okay.
So we want to make things like that available.
Okay. Yep.
Father Lovell, thoughts?
I agree with everything that you say. And, one thing that we were trying to move the coalition towards was housing for priests. We were looking at an old Franciscan monastery in Northwest Indiana. We did an incredible job surveying it and decided that it was going to be a money pit and that we were not going to invest in that 40 acres. We found 2.5 acres of a 4 to 5 bedroom house. They say 4 to 5 bedroom house because they had one room that didn't have a closet, which could have easily put a closet in and make it a very small bedroom. And we decided to purchase that. I was living there. We had about 15, 20 priests that came in. And once I was ejected from the organization, I was evicted. Even though they knew I left the house, they still went through the process of evicting me. So it's on my credit report that I've been evicted, or on one of my reports. I don't know if it's credit or which one it is. So if I wanted to rent a place, there is a notice of that on there. I'm fighting to get that taken off. And
for everybody that's listening, somehow there's a storm outside. So if you've seen us looking out, we just had lightning. And
we're in the heart of Texas right now.
Which, by the way, doesn't happen often.
No.
So we embrace it.
But, even before we bought that house, and we only had it for about a year before the current board got rid of it and really made no money off of it, I was already in communication with Dan, and, he wanted to set up here at Sanctus Ranch a place where priests could come to live if they need to work in the school. Now, I will tell you this, from my own personal experience, we get a little bit leery as priests, just everything that's happened since the Boston Globe report, priests are a little bit leery about being around minors. Okay?
Of course.
And that's just the culture that we live in. It's been beaten into all of us that, we got to keep that separate. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. Let me make that clear too. But what I told Dan is I think the need is so big is that we're going to need a lot of safe houses, not just Sanctus Ranch down in Texas, not just what the coalition had in Northwest Indiana, but around the country. And one thing, a bunch of the priests that were canceled, that were helped by the coalition, that were basically dropped by the coalition for being in support of me, we gathered here in January this year, and we came up with the idea that we need to have an organization in addition to the canceled priest fund that's here, and we want to call ourselves the Companions of St. John Fisher, whose Dies Natalis is tomorrow, June 22nd. We're filming on June 21st. And, we want to do that because we realized it's not just emergency needs with the priests.
Right.
Priests need fraternity. So many priests, especially canceled priests, have been living a bachelor life, and that's not what celibacy is about. That's not what the priesthood is about. And a great model for this, no matter where you stand on Archbishop Lefebvre and the Society of St. Pius X, they have a very good model of that their priests live together during the week in a priory, and then they go out to their different apostolates on the weekend. And I think the only way the secular priesthood, the diocesan priesthood, is going to survive in this millennium if they adopt an oratory type approach to living together. That secular priests live together. That doesn't mean we become monks. That doesn't mean we pray all the hours together of the divine office, but it means that we have a meal together from time to time. It means that we come together for prayer from time to time. And the priests want to do that. We want to have that kind of support group, even if we're scattered all over the country, a place where we can come, once or twice a year for retreat together, to just have that fraternity. And so that's why we're also starting, in addition to the Canceled Priest Fund here at Sanctus Ranch, we're starting the Companions of St. John Fisher, and we're in the process of getting that developed also into a 501c3. Again, for those that want to give, and we're going to have, and I think Dan put this in the article so succinctly, that everything is going to be transparent, that we're going to make sure that there are monthly reports, that we're going to make sure that every dollar is accounted for, that you don't have to worry about where it's going. And, one thing that I've been impressed with, and I was going to say I was going to make Dan blush, but he has such a big beard that you won't see it, is that, it's just, I'm amazed at how quickly he moves. You're always all over the place. You're building a school, you're building this building, you're building that building. You're tearing apart 990s, in your free time. It's just amazing how you do all this work. So just, thank you, Dan, for that, because the canceled priests, especially the ones that came in January, we're very, very grateful for everything that Sanctus Ranch and your family has done. And, I just want to say, without naming names, I know that there's been some priests here who have not been as grateful for your support, but all of us that are coming together as the Companions of St. John Fisher, we really appreciate everything that the Sevigny family has done. So I wanted to get that out in public and say thank you very much, not only for the article, but for everything that was said. My canon lawyer and my civil attorney both read the article, and their responses independently of each other were, you just got vindicated.
Yeah.
And so thank you for that. I appreciate it.
And I think that needs to happen. Sometimes, in our Catholic world, I don't know why everybody's fighting with each other and why there's such vitriol and things of that nature. It's unnecessary. Let's get about the mission. Let's just put out the information and let's move forward. And let's understand there's going to be times that we're going to have failures. People see a lot of the things that we do, and I appreciate that, Father Lovell, very much. But then there's other people that are like, God, stop doing all these things. Just don't do that. Don't. So you're going to have different opinions. That's fine.
Right.
But let's just get about the mission that God's given us. To echo what you were saying, Father Lovell, this week, right after writing this article, I got emails and then I got phone calls. I heard from priests, many around the country, thank you for this. Just so you know, I've been absolutely alone. And I've said, hey, one of the things that we're hoping to do is to have a gathering once in a while, can get you in touch with these other priests so that they can have a conversation. Because sometimes what happens is the only priests that in the secular priesthood are those in your particular diocese. Once you're shunned out, then they're like, what do I do? They're walking on eggshells.
Yeah.
And that fraternity needs to come back because, let's be honest, their vocation continues.
Correct.
And so hopefully that will happen out of this organization and also the companions as well.
Hey, and by the way, here's an alarming statistic that most people should be really proud of. For these men, for these individuals that are part of this category of priests that have been pulled out, a disproportionate amount of them are straight.
Right. Sorry. Yes.
So because he mentioned bachelor, and I just thought these are straight guys, which makes it a real significant sacrifice, right?
Could I make a comment on that? So both on Eric Salmon's X account where he published Dan's article and also on my account where the article was also posted, you'll see comments from people, and they're grifters, as the younger generations call them. They're just people that are out fishing.
Trolls.
That's what they are. And they're saying, well, there's really no such thing as canceled priests. These are priests that just are asses and can't get along with everybody. Let me tell you something right now, and I put this in a comment in response. I usually don't respond on X. The most arrogant people I've ever met are priests that work in chanceries who, as I say, have the croziers and the miters of the bishops underneath their beds because they're waiting for that call from the nuncio to tell them where they're going to be made a bishop.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And, so I'm thinking to myself, you think that just because we're out of ministry is because we didn't play well together in the sandbox?
Correct.
And I'm thinking to myself, of all of these priests that run these dioceses, I'm not talking just the bishop, I'm talking about his underlings, his vicars, all right? Some of the most arrogant, self-serving people you'll ever meet who are vindictive to the kill. I mean, they're part of the Lavender Mafia. We're talking about straight and gay. I mean, they're part of the Lavender Mafia. And they persecute priests that want to just be priests.
Yeah.
As simple as that, okay?
Yep.
All of us have foibles, okay? If any married man, comes to the confessional and says, Father, I don't know what to confess, I tell him, go speak to your wife. She will give you a very good examination of conscience, okay? Yes. We all have our foibles. I just mentioned, there have been priests here that have not treated the Sevigny family very well. The horror stories I heard, I thought they were horror stories. And the way the Sevigny family just dealt with it and moved forward is just a beautiful thing to see. And, it's not just about, I'm going to mention this later at the gala presentation, it's not just about the canceled priests and the canceled priest front or the companions for St. John Fisher. Dan is trying to build a school where most pastors who have schools want to get rid of the school as quickly as possible, not realizing that it is the primary evangelization source in their parish. They want to get rid of it because it's just so much of a headache. Well, we could just do that with CCD, okay? So what we're seeing here is what we're hoping that is going to crop up here in southwestern Texas is another Catholic family land, for lack of a better term.
Sure.
We want to see people to move down here. We want to see people to gather around the school in Lumen, Christi, because, in my opinion, even more important than helping the priests is forming the next generation. And we have to keep that in mind. We need priests. We need to support those priests. But what we need to prepare for the next generation. And that's what's happening here. And it's not really happening anywhere else. Very few other places are doing it.
Sure.
Oh, that's great.
Good point.
So we got exciting times. Things are moving forward. You know, it's been great having Father Lovell here. We'll definitely be having him back on the podcast.
Absolutely. That was a good intro, though. Good crash course to Father John and his all that's transpired and all that you guys hope to do. But this is going to be an ongoing conversation for sure.
Absolutely.
And I think you'll be hanging out here more often, probably, right?
Preferably more in the fall and winter. But yeah,
There you go.
If anyone wants to donate to purchase a white cassock for the successive heat
There you go.
in the summer down here in southern Texas.
Yeah.
I'm only partially joking on that. So
Well, the 6,000, that's one cassock. So, you know,
a cassock's not that expensive.
that was a whole annual salary with the previous organization.
Exactly. And let me tell you, is just that wearing black wool out in the Texas sun, that is penance. That is penance right there.
Yeah, reminds me of my marching band days.
Yes.
Yeah, we had the old thick wool, long sleeve, and then we did the parade here, the Battle of the Flowers parade in April. So I can now I was carrying a sousaphone as well on my back. So my penance was harsher.
There you
So
go.
I'm sorry.
I won't
sorry
deny
to one
that.
up you on that.
I won't deny you that. So.
But it was a white color, so you got me on the black. You got me on the dark. Yeah, but no, great conversation. Thank you for joining us today, Father John Lovell.
Thank you.
And we appreciate all that you've done and all you've had to endure for the last decade plus.
Appreciate it.
But praise be to God, there's still hope.
Yep.
And a lot of it comes from people like Dan and his family that are stepping out of their comfort zone to build this. But it also comes from you, the listener, the viewer, being willing to come out of your comfort zone as well, to step out of your, to pull a little something out of your pocketbook, or hopefully a lot of something maybe out of your pocketbook. Because if you couldn't already tell, there's a dire need here. And the priests are in dire need. And I can attest to the fact that I've met many of these men. We've sat around the fire. We've shared a cigar and a whiskey. I've heard the stories firsthand. These are good and holy men. They're straight as an arrow. One of them's even married, for crying out loud. And so they're doing really good things. And what an absolute, I mean, it's such a nightmare to think that such good and holy men are not able to be in their vocations and do the work that God called them to do.
Yeah. And let me just for clarification, the one that is married, or two that are married,
Right.
They were converts from Anglicanism.
That's right. That's right.
They didn't get canceled and decide to go to get married.
Good.
That's
Scandalizing everyone on the podcast.
Let's make that
Marco.
clear. They had the permission of the Vatican to be ordained as married men.
Very true.
So.
Yes, that's true. Those were not. That didn't occur afterwards. And yeah, you're exactly right. Thanks for that clarification. We needed that asterisk.
Yes, exactly. So if there's anybody that's watching and had a good time today and you want to know more about the organization, you can go to unprofitable.org. You can also find a link to that in our show notes that we'll have. And then you can also go to thercci.org for more information. And, we'll be looking forward to sharing more of what has happened with the new Cancel Priest Fund and the ways that people are being helped.
Yeah, that's right. And by the way, again, we appreciate the comments on YouTube and what have you. Honestly, good or bad, we welcome it. We do welcome it. And then the other thing, too, we hadn't been doing a good job of this, Dan, but we do have a dedicated website for the podcast as well, restoringchristianculture.org. If you are enjoying the podcast, this is the place to leave us a review.
Amen.
By the way. So if you're one of our frequent viewers or listeners, we'd really appreciate the plug. The 5-star plug if you're happy. If not, if it's a 2 or a 3, it's probably Dan's fault.
Yeah. I wouldn't blame me.
As I used to say, like and subscribe, and probably that said is that a lot of people have been asking, my podcast, Hope in the Desert, be coming back. We are in the process of making that happen. So stay tuned.
There you go. Good stuff. Excellent. Thanks again, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right,
God bless. Bye-bye.